2 weeks ago, Newzroom Afrika spoke to Liliesleaf CEO Nic Wolpe, who informed us about the indefinite closure of the heritage site due to the government's failure to support them financially. Soon after that, the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture responded at the criticism that it did not provide adequate relief to Liliesleaf Farm. It said the heritage site has not been able to account for 8.1 million rand in funding. The department added that it had funded Liliesleaf to the tune of about 70 million rand over a 13-year period. To elaborate further on this, we're joined by Liliesleaf CEO Nic Wolpe and Vusithemba Ndima, who is the Deputy Director General for Heritage Promotion and Preservation in the Department of Arts and Culture. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's begin with you, Nic. There's been several statements that have been in the public domain. In fact, I'll quote one from the Department of Arts and Culture. They say that they have funded Liliesleaf Farm, and that's in the range of 70 million rand, and this is over a period of 13 years. And they say that for this financial year, 2021, an additional 1.8 million rand was budgeted for the trust. And they say that all this was done against an understanding of the historical significance and contribution of Liliesleaf Farm. And they're calling for these funds to be accounted for. Is this correct in your assertion?
Good evening, Bongiwe. Very simply, no, if I may explain why. So let's take the 70 million rand over 13 years. In 2016, in November 2016, the minister provided us with a narrative, and in that narrative it stated that the Department of Arts and Culture had given Liliesleaf 70 million rand, 70,954,000 rand. Now we disputed that figure, and because we disputed that figure, we undertook our own, call it audit investigation, with our auditors, Grant Thornton, and they were only able to identify 61,540,000 rand, which we notified the department of this difference between the two amounts, and we were never able to get an answer from them regarding this difference. So that's the first point. There is this discrepancy between these two figures. Now, with regard to the 8.1 million and the claim by the department that it is unaccountable for, again, that's incorrect. In December 2015, Liliesleaf submitted a financial report, a narrative report as to how it had spent the money. So we had submitted it. And as I've been saying all along, the problem is around the fact that Liliesleaf in March of 2015 signed an MOU for a project funding. And Liliesleaf did not use that money for project funding, but used it for operational funding. And the trustees were aware that we were using the money for operational purposes. So the real issue is this. And again, I will reiterate, yes, we didn't use the money for the purpose that it was designated for, but we did provide a report as to how that money was used. And because that report did not speak to the MOU, we were not able to get the balance of 900,000. And Bongiwe, the other issue is, why is it taken, let's go up to July last year, why has it taken over 4.5 years for this matter to become an issue when they knew back in 2015, when Liliesleaf submitted the original report, that it didn't speak to the MOU signed?
And now, Nic, I'm going to ask you just to pause there for a second and bring in Babu Ndima in this conversation. Babu Ndima, what Nic is saying is that they did account for the funds, but they're just not speaking to the MOU that you would have signed then between yourselves and Liliesleaf, especially when it comes to the purpose of this money, this 8.1 million that the minister is talking about when it comes to some of the work that needed to be done to enhance some of the infrastructure there. What do you say then to what Nic is raising tonight?
Maybe let me just greet the viewers, yourself and Nic. Look, I think that Nic has clearly indicated, just agreed publicly that, you know, he violated the MOU or the MOA. the memorandum of agreement, he had come to the department with a very specific project to be funded. And we funded him on that basis. Now, when we received the report, we were expecting Nic to report on the project that he had come to the department to ask for money. Now, immediately after that, we started engaging Nic to say, but Nic, you have not responded. You have not given the report as per the MOA, because if you do so, therefore, it means this is an irregular expenditure. To our disappointment, Bongiwe, Nic even indicated that, look, he has sat with the board, and the board is aware of the irregular expenditure. The board is saying that all that is required is to declare the irregular expenditure, and so that we can continue to give them money. So it doesn't work that way. The Public Finance Management Act is very clear in terms of how you account for monies that you have received. But also, for us to continue to give money to an institution that has defaulted in terms of the report, it would put us into big trouble. That is why we have had a number of engagements with the Liliesleaf. Even at some point, the minister met with the board of Liliesleaf. They had even undertaken to do a forensic investigation yesterday as we speak. And they indicated that they are waiting for a forensic investigation so that we can understand what happened to that money. And on that basis, we can then see how we can take matters forward.
Babandima, I'm going to ask both of you to pause there for now. Let's continue with this conversation on the other side of 7 o'clock, because this is an important conversation that we need to have with the two of you as the department as well as Liliesleaf Farm, because this has been one of those concerning stories. A significant part of our history is at risk of not being seen by members of the public, and we all do understand the significance of Liliesleaf Farm. And I'm going to ask both of you to pause for us in just a moment. On the other side of 7 o'clock, we continue then to understand these issues of this memorandum of an agreement. With this conversation, as you would have seen in the previous hour, we were looking at the indefinite closure of the Liliesleaf Farm. Of course, this is what they say is due to the government's failure to support them financially. We were still in conversation with Liliesleaf CEO Nic Wolpe and Vusithemba Ndima, who is the Deputy Director General for Heritage Promotion and Preservation in the Department of Arts and Culture. Thank you to you both for staying on with this particular conversation. Nic, you would have heard what the department is raising there to say that if the memorandum of agreement was not stuck to in terms of how the funds would have been used, because they understand they were for one purpose and they were not then used for the purpose that they were intended for them, that raises red flags. And I think they would be justified, though, in raising some of these red flags.
I fully agree with you. Liliesleaf has never disputed that, never has said that the funds were not used for the purpose that they were signed for. We have never denied that. I think the issue for Liliesleaf is, first and foremost, the trustees were very much aware of the fact that there was, from the Liliesleaf side, a clear understanding that these funds would be used, and it is recorded in trustees' minutes. But what I think is important is when they say we did not account for the funds, that is misleading, because we did account for the funds. What would have been more appropriate, in our opinion, would have been for the department to say, you did not account for the funds for the purpose that they were used for. You accounted for the funds that were used for something else. So you did account for them. What has been created out there is the perception that these funds went missing, that there was an irregular expenditure in that sort of negative connotation. We accounted for the funds. We knew what they were being used for. They were used to maintain and ensure that Liliesleaf was able to operate and continue to remain open. I think that is the fundamental point here.
Take me into your confidence, Nic. What exactly were they used for? As you talk about maintenance and all of that, give us a breakdown of what you've submitted to the Department of Arts and Culture.
Well, I can't remember clearly because, the original submission was in December 2015. But, given the fact that we've been working on it, we paid for salaries, and if we want to get technical, about 1.3 million, if I remember correctly, was paid for things that were contained in the funding proposal. So they were, for exhibits, for example, maintenance, upgrade, improvements of exhibits. And they were paid, money was paid for general maintenance, maintaining the site, looking after the site, cleaning. So it was a broad range of expenditures, items, which the money was used for, and it was all accounted for. And I think that's the important thing, that it was accounted for and the money was used for the benefits of Liliesleaf.
Mr. Ndima, what Mr. Wolpe is saying here is that the money was accounted for. Some 1.3 may have been used for what it was intended for, according to the MOA. But then he says the money was used for paying salaries and other things that he cannot remember right now. Is this your recollection when it comes to the submission that you've received?
Look, I was looking at the report that Nic gave, which was a progress report. As I did indicate that this particular funding was about the upgrading and enhancement of the exhibition infrastructure. Now, on the 15th of December 2015, we got a report from Nic. In that report, he had spent about 2.3 million. Of course, it clearly indicates, the items that were purchased through that number of service providers that were being paid for work that were done. Now, the outstanding balance of 6.6 could not be accounted for. But when we asked Mr. Wolpe what happened to this amount, and then he indicated to us that he used it for operations. Now, Bongiwe, what happens is, if you have entered into an MOU with an organization for specific projects, and in the course of implementation, and the organization realizes that there are challenges here, there are provisions in MOUs that you need to come back to the accounting officer and maybe request to deviate from the contract. That is provided for in the MOU. Most MOUs or MOAs have got those provisions. And of course, if the story is being narrated and it's clear and it's understandable, the motivation is cogent, chief accounting officers in most cases, they would say, yes, it's fine, let's validate the contract for the MOA. And then what happens after that? Then you have an addendum. Why do you have an addendum, Bongi? It's just for the record. When the AG comes to you to say account for those funds, you are able to produce all the evidence from the point of the inception of the project and at the transition of the project because of circumstances. And that should be documented. And then even the approval must be documented. It therefore becomes easy. When the report comes at the end, the final report, you are able to just produce the evidence. In this case, you meet with the CEO. He then tells you that he has met with his board. There's nothing wrong with the meeting of the board. There's nothing wrong with maybe some ideas that the board had. But administratively, as a CEO, then you need to then put that in writing, the decisions of the board. And then on that basis, you vary the contract. But the contract is not varied after the fact. That's totally irregular. So I'm sure that Nic agrees with me that that was a clear irregularity. And as we have said, you might have seen the statements where we clearly indicate that Liliesleaf is one of our jewels in the history of this country, if you look at its history. But of course, even if it has got that rich history, accounting must happen. And that's why I was saying before we closed or went for break, I said, we are awaiting the report from the board, what the board has you maybe uncovered, and then we will take things from there.
So it sounds, pardon me, Baba Ndima, it sounds like then what you're saying is that if there needed to be an amendment to the original agreement of what the funds would have been used for, Nic should have come back to the department and say, this is what I would like to use the funds for, because this now has come up. Am I understanding you correctly?
That's true. That's what happens. Contracts are varied, but when you vary the contract, it must be in accordance with the law. It must be in accordance with the Public Finance Management Act, because even the MOAs that we draft, they are in line with the law. All deviating right. from that without approval by the Chief Accounting Officer, then you have already violated the law.
Now, Nic, one of the things that I'm listening to here is that you could have gone back to the department to ask for this amendment, but also the Board of Trustees is accusing you of making unfounded accusations against the Department of Arts and Culture. What do you say to that? Because it sounds to me like you've also somewhat may have rattled feathers there.
To be honest with you, I don't know what allegations I made against the Department of Arts and Culture. All I was saying was I found it very hurtful to say that the money was not accounted for, that the money had gone missing, because that's what some of the headlines in the papers have been saying.
But you do understand, pardon me, Nic,
you do understand
though, you do understand that they're saying that you should have gone back to say that you are now going to change the agreement. Do you get that?
Of course I do. Of course I get it. I'm not saying I don't get it, and and I'm not going to sit here and say that I did do it when I didn't do it. I think one of the things which I would like to say, that it should be a collective responsibility, because the trustees were all engaged in the discussion, and we failed to do something that we should have done, and that was go back to the department. So again, I'm playing extremely open cards here, and I'm not going to, for one moment, try and defend or justify those actions.
So are you saying that the Board of Trustees is leaving you to hang alone when there should be collective responsibility?
I believe so, because, the trustees were very much made aware of it when, at the trustees meeting of 2015, June of 2015, 6 weeks after we received the funds, it is minuted that I made reference to the fact that there was concern that the money was given under a project, and I was concerned about that, and the trustees agreed and said we should go back to the department and make it very clear to them that we need those funds were for operational purposes. Now, of course, that never happened. But what I'm saying here is that my actions were open and transparent, and the board at the time were very much aware of what I was doing.
It sounds to me, though, that the actions were open and transparent with just you there, as Liliesleaf Farm, but not with the department. Let's then talk about this forensic investigation that has now been instituted. Talk to us then about how is that going, and when can we expect a finding? Have they made you aware of this?
I have not. There has been no communication with me regarding the forensic investigation. I was interviewed regarding it, but that's as close as to the investigation I got. I mean, in fact, I was notified by the media that the trustees had actually received the final report. So what I was learning, what was happening, was through the media. So I was not being informed as to what was going on.
All right. And Ndima, when you look at what is currently happening, one of the things that is at stake here, in fact, not even one, the main thing that is at stake here is a rich part of South Africa's history. The future is hanging in the balance. People are disappointed when they go to Liliesleaf Farm. They're not able to get a sense of the importance of our history. What becomes the way forward then here in order to ensure that all is not lost?
I think that one of the things that we would have to wait for is the, first and foremost, that forensic investigation report is going to be quite important to us in terms of its findings and what the recommendations are. Maybe immediately after that, there would then be a determination in terms of how we take matters forward, as I've clearly indicated. And I think the minister, our DG, has repeatedly indicated, ourselves, all of us, have said Liliesleaf is a very important institution with very rich heritage. But I think certain things need to be sorted out before we consider providing financial support. Unfortunately, if certain things have not been put in place, it would be difficult for us to go ahead and support an institution that has poorly accounted before without even closing that particular matter, because there must be some kind of a closure on the matter. I think this forensic investigation that the board is talking about, it's the way to go. It's a first step towards the resolution of a problem. But all of us would like to see Liliesleaf doors open, but of course, after certain things have been dealt with. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Wolpe, as a final question, very briefly, will this forensic investigation that the trustees are now, have carried out, and as you say, as you've seen, that it's been concluded, we are, of course, waiting to see if that is indeed the case. Will it exonerate you?
Without a doubt. I mean, as I've indicated, the money that was used for the benefit of Liliesleaf. So within that context, no individual, myself included, or any other individual received money. The money was used solely and squarely for the purposes of ensuring that Liliesleaf was able to continue operating and continue to function. And again, I think it's, the wording poorly accounted is, I think, is not necessarily true. I mean, we have been open and very transparent with how the money was spent and how the money was dispersed. And I think, again, that's where I take some exception, because we are open and transparent, and the report and the information that we have provided to the forensic auditors highlights that the money was all used for the benefit of Liliesleaf to ensure it continues to operate, stay open, so that the public are able to come through and experience this unique and very important historical site.
All right. Thank you to you both for your time. This is an important story, and we'll continue to reach out to you both, especially when this forensic investigation has been concluded and what are the findings thereof. And we would appreciate it if you can indulge us one more time. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Liliesleaf CEO Nic Wolpe and Vusithemba Ndima, the Deputy Director General for Heritage Promotion and Preservation in the Arts and Culture Ministry. Just